of the most memorable characters that I encountered in this story was the American general Amos Freeze. Remembered by just a few military historians today as the father of American chemical warfare, Freeze had teamed with American chemical firms to make the U.S. a poison powerhouse that not only decided the war, but would also shape the course of post-war American life. A fanatical anti-communist and later a pro-fascist, Freeze proved to be a major player in the Red Scare that took place here after the Bolshevik Revolution. And he promulgated the handy charge of a worldwide communist conspiracy that claimed Reds were behind every progressive cause. And Freeze had his army staff compile a so-called spider's web chart, purportedly showing how the League of Women Voters and the ACLU and other pinkos were all linked together in a vast left-wing conspiracy. He also handed out copies of the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which had been forged to show a Jewish plot to take over the world. And in 1919, Freeze's associate, Army Captain John B. Trevor, unveiled before a congressional committee a huge multicolored ethnic map, as it was called, showing where all of the Jewish neighborhoods in New York City were located in the event that the Reds had to be rounded up. The vast majority of Americans opposed any continued resort to chemical warfare, but Freeze managed to keep the government from disbanding the Army's Chemical Warfare Service, in part by wielding incredible political pressure through propaganda and other means. Freeze convinced Congress that America should continue to manufacture poisons for, quote, constructive peacetime uses, end quote, such as eradicating the boll weevil and stemming insect-borne diseases. One of these uses included the use of gases in law enforcement, tear gas for crowd control, and lethal gas for executions. In his view, chemical warfare was more, quote, humane than conventional warfare. And he wanted to spread the idea that killing criminals by lethal gas would be quick, painless, and cheap. Anti-war groups protested the idea of a gas chamber, arguing quite rightly that any such use of the stuff to kill human beings would violate international human rights protocols. But the U.S. government supported gas executions just as it promoted rampant and unregulated use of pesticides, chlorination of water, and other uses that the chemical lobby deemed desirable. The original idea was to gas an unsuspecting prisoner as he slept in his cell, but that concept proved unfeasible. So, officials at Nevada's state prison converted the institution's stone barber shop into the world's first execution gas chamber. 5 convicts and 4 guards were disciplined for refusing to support any such use of lethal gas, but that didn't stop the ruling forces. Behind the scenes, Freeze's chemical warfare experts helped matters along without leaving too many fingerprints. Serving as the official executioner was a gassing expert, E.B. Walker, representing the outfit that had supplied the poison. That company, by the way, was the California Cyanide Company of Los Angeles, run by a German-American industrialist who had for many years served as West Coast representative for Degussa, the German chemical powerhouse. Although competitors, the major American and German chemical companies still collaborated through their international cartel, Das Cartel. To disperse the poison, Walker brought along a spraying device that was normally used for fumigating orange groves. Using the former barbershop as their makeshift lethal chamber, Walker and his team tested their procedure on a cat and several kittens with apparent success. The creatures seemed to have died within 15 seconds. Originally, 3 convicted murderers had been slated for death. One of them was a Mexican-American, but the governor commuted his sentence to life imprisonment. The other 2 were Chinese immigrants, but Yui Singh's life was also spared, leaving Guy John to face the music alone. So early on the chilly Friday morning of February 8th, 1924, national attention focused on Carson City, Nevada. Guards nervously strapped the frightened prisoner into a crude wooden chair and exited the chamber. Outside the building, dozens of witnesses peered through the fogged windows to catch a glimpse of what was about to happen. The reporters scribbled away, but weather conditions didn't cooperate. The air temperature proved so cold that much of the liquid failed to vaporize. As a result, effects of the gas were hindered, and Guy John kept showing signs of life for more than 2 long minutes. He suffered through a horribly botched procedure. More than 2 hours passed before the chamber was finally considered safe enough for a crew to enter so they could remove the body. Nevertheless, Nevada officials proclaimed it a success. And a spokesman for the Army reported to his superiors that despite the kinks in the first go-around, it was, quote, a wonderful and human way of execution. Stories went out on the international wire. And over the next several years, Americans and Germans worked hand in glove with each other in the cartel to develop the poison gas technology. And scientists from both countries shared some of their patents and know-how, visiting each other's plants and enjoying holidays together. Within a few years, 7 other states would follow Nevada's lead and build their own execution gas chambers. The first wave of gas chamber construction occurred in the 1930s, not in Europe, but across the U.S., as several American states rushed to make lethal gas their official method of execution. In 1934, Warden Roy Best at Colorado's Canyon City Penitentiary was directed to build a new death house and gas chamber capable of carrying out multiple executions. The death house looked more like a hamburger stand. To ensure the gas chamber within it would prove effective and safe for the witnesses and staff, Best hired a Denver-based firm, Eaton Metal Products Company, to construct a state-of-the-art death-dealing apparatus. Eaton was a leading steel plate fabricator that had manufactured fuel tanks, grain bins, and other industrial items. The company assigned its Denver plant superintendent, Earl C. Liston, to design a suitable device. Liston's contraption looked like a science fiction space capsule or a diving bell. When it arrived at the prison, spectators gawked to catch a look and discovered a pretty girl has been placed inside as a gag. The new gas chamber was installed at the prison and first used on June 22, 1934, when convicted murderer William Cody Kelly was put to death. 15 Physicians and a bunch of other witnesses watched through glass windows as an executioner pulled a lever, releasing 12 potassium cyanide eggs into a bucket full of sulfuric acid and water, thereby releasing highly poisonous hydrocyanic acid into the chamber. The technicians were always making improvements. One of Colorado's most controversial killings involved a Syrian-American youth, Joe Arady, who was severely mentally disabled and branded as a, quote, feeble-minded moron, end quote. Convicted of participating in the rape and murder of a 15-year-old girl, Arady was gassed despite serious doubts about his guilt. And to this day, activists are still fighting to prove his innocence. Besides Nevada, Colorado, Arizona and California, North Carolina, and Missouri also used the gas chamber. Those put to death included blacks, the mentally ill, mentally disabled, juveniles, and a few women. A few states experimented with multiple gassings. Each one had been convicted of a crime, and every prison execution was witnessed by the press. But these were gas chamber executions. Eaton went on to manufacture gas chambers in 4 more states during the 1930s, prompting the United Press to report, "Denver, nationally famous as a health center, ironically has become the nation's leading producer of lethal gas chambers." Eaton's gas chamber was patented in the United States, and company executives expressed pride in their unique product. Eaton, incidentally, is still in business, just as most of the companies that I name in my book are still operating, although not presently engaged in gas executions. Eaton's president refused to open up their execution files to me. These days, he doesn't like to talk publicly about that part of the firm's past. Once America had pioneered the use of the lethal gas chamber executions, and the American courts and the American public had accepted them as both legal and humane, Hitler embraced the concept to achieve his own demented goals. In Nazi hands, the gas chamber was expanded on an unimaginable scale to become the deadliest instrument for mass murder in world history, the most efficient tool ever devised for exterminating millions of innocent men, women, and children, the mentally and physically disabled, terminally ill, homosexuals, gypsies, communists, dissidents, and Jews. The Germans built some of their gas chambers into huge structures capable of killing hundreds at a time. They also employed a form of hydrogen cyanide known as Zyklon B, which before the war had been made and marketed mostly in the United States and used widely as a pesticide. The U.S. Army still used it in its own barracks. And Zyklon was easy to use. All you had to do was pour the crystals down a chute into the gas chamber. Both the Germans and the Americans were careful never to disclose that they had worked together. And everyone involved, from the German and American corporate executives to the SS officers and the American prison authorities, even the war crimes prosecutors, all maintained their conspiracy of silence about the German-American gas chamber connection.